AEW Full Gear is this Saturday night. Of course, we're going to have a bonus episode. We'll preview Full Gear tomorrow on my wrestling podcast. It's still real to me. But joining us here from out in California, because that's where it is this Saturday in Los Angeles, AEW Full Gear, Alex Marvez, NFL Radio, of course, AEW reporter. He's got his hand in a bunch of different cookie jars. It's great to have you aboard here, Alex. So let's talk a little bit about AEW, a little pro wrestling first, and then I'll get your thoughts on the Dolphins, who, of course, you covered for many, many years down here in South Florida. So first up, you guys are out in Los Angeles. Big show this Saturday night. Big main event. MJF, Jay White. Is MJF the hottest star in pro wrestling right now?
I think he is. I'll be quite honest with you. I would say if you look at Wrestler of the Year, which it's objective, of course, and Will Ospreay's had an amazing run of incredible matches in 2023, and I don't want to take anything away from him. But when you look at the total package, quality of wrestling match, when you look at the character development, so to speak, of MJF, the evolution of him, as you will, as a performer, both inside the ring and on the mic. And he was always a great interview, but I just feel like MJF has taken it to a new level. And I also think, too, you could see the level of trust that AEW management has in Maxwell Jacob Friedman, right? I mean, he is the standard bearer, mantle carrier, whatever you want to call it, for our company. And I think he's doing a really nice job of it. So I'm excited about that. Obviously a couple intriguing storylines here. Jay White has had his number for quite a while, undefeated in singles competition since joining AEW, former champion in Japan, the first Triple Crown, I believe, champion in New Japan. I mean, he won everything. Basically, that was there to win there. So you've got that. You've got the Devil storyline. Who is that under that mask? You got Samoa Joe. And of course, he has offered his services to MJF for the 0 hour, a buy-in for Full Gear, where it's going to be MJF single-handedly right now defending those titles against the Guns, the Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles. So I think ZASLOW, he is really doing an incredible job. And, the amazing part is for Max, 27 years old? I mean, really, I think that the best is yet to come.
Ric Flair put out a tweet yesterday that he just met MJF for the very first time, and he was humbled to meet him. He thinks he's outstanding. What are your experiences with him behind the scenes?
Well, it's interesting because I was at the bar last night, and no shock to anyone, Ric Flair was there. And, and I got to see this big handshake between Rick and MJF as they conversed. Max is a perfectionist, man. ZASLOW, no joke. I mean, he knows what he wants. I mean, yes, he can have a fun time, and there is a human being behind all of this. But make no mistake about it, the MJF that you see on camera isn't all that far removed, from the, quote, real life MJF. I mean, he is determined to leave his mark in the pro wrestling business, to be the best that he possibly can be, maybe one of the best ever. And I think it's a little premature when we start talking about best ever because of longevity of career, et cetera. But I think you see someone here who is multi-talented, multifaceted. It's not just the wrestling, obviously, right? I mean, and now he's getting his star turn in a movie, the Iron Claw, the Von Erich movie that's coming out. He has a producer's title on top of that, as well as an acting role in it as Lance Von Erich. More talented than Lance Von Erich, but nonetheless, I think that's what's exciting about it. And listen, having a mentor like Ric Flair, if MJF wants to turn to him to ask some questions about how to carry himself as a champion, so to speak, and continue his road in pro wrestling, who better than the Nature Boy?
Do you have any relationship over the years with Ric Flair?
1989. Rick brought it up at the bar last night. That's how far we go back. Because when I was at the Miami Herald, and he remembers it, writing one of the very first National Pro Wrestling columns, I did a very big story on Ric Flair at a time when pro wrestling was not mainstream. In fact, ZASLOW is really frowned upon by a lot in the sports community because of the belief, oh, it's fake. Really? Oh, wow. Good. Glad you figured that out. But my point, though, is that with Rick, we've had a friendship ever since then. So we're coming up now, what? I mean, my gosh, I'm even thinking about it, 30-something years of knowing each other. And listen, Rick, you got to understand, when Ric Flair is around, almost every wrestler, it's like a kid in a candy store. You know what I mean? Like it's like everyone's just so excited. I want to grab a drink with Ric Flair. I want to have a conversation with Ric Flair. I want to talk to him. I want to say thank you. Those types of things. I mean, it's really Grand Poobah type status. And I just think a great addition to our company as well. Listen, I'm not expecting Rick to go, to go work 60-minute matches, ever even wrestle again. I don't dismiss the possibility, but he's 74 years old, but I still think he has so much that he can offer to the pro wrestling business, and he makes us a better company having him around.
It's amazing that he remembered that. Like you must have been touched that he brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, we've been friends, like what I consider is interesting. I actually watched a University of Minnesota football game with him, a subject near and dear to his heart, because for those who don't know, Ric Flair, his first year in college with the Golden Gophers was as a 260-pound offensive lineman. But he
Yeah.
liked the party lifestyle too much, and he wasn't really big on going to class. He loved football, and he still follows it very closely, as we see by all the Jim Harbaugh controversy with Michigan right now. But nonetheless, I mean, that's how far we go back. So Rick has always been incredibly gracious to me, and I really, truly appreciate it. I appreciate him being with our company.
I've told you this in the past, where that wrestling column that you used to write in the Herald was a really big deal to me at 8, 9, 10 years old back then, because I knew you from covering the Dolphins, and then I'd open up the Herald, and it's like, wait, the guy who covers the Dolphins, he also likes pro wrestling like I do, because it was not cool to like pro wrestling back then. And it was a really big deal to me that, hold on, I like sports, and I also like pro wrestling, and there's other people out there who are doing that also. It's a really big deal to me back then.
Well, I mean, things have changed, right? I mean, pro wrestling has acceptance now. People view it in a much more different light than back then. I had editors tell me, listen, we think your career is going to be hurt by the fact that you write a pro wrestling column.
Yeah.
That maybe that people wouldn't take your reporting on real sports seriously. And that did have a big influence on my career. I mean, one of the reasons that, maybe I didn't try to go into wrestling full time at some point, or maybe just even continue doing some different things with pro wrestling. And I still continued the column, but, there was always in the back of my mind, am I affecting my credibility based upon this? And really, I shouldn't have listened. I mean, listen, I'm not going to complain about my life. I'm very blessed to do what I do, but it just was a different time. And now, and one of the things that drives me crazy, Zaslow, is that everyone thinks they're an insider, and there's so much stuff there out on the internet, and things that I know is from being there, half truths. You know what I mean? At best, or just maybe one person's opinion, and it's coming out. I really, I sort of long for the days, and maybe it's self-loathing, but maybe not knowing what's going on behind the scenes, just letting it come to you, just enjoying the product, enjoying surprises, not getting involved in people's personal lives, or if they're having a dispute about how a match is going to go or how a match is going to end. I mean, those are like who's coming in, who's not. To me, if I'm a fan, I stay away from the internet legitimately, because it spoils the surprise and it paints a picture that really isn't accurate about our company. And I think that's been one of the most disappointing things about 2023. AEW is a great place to work. It really is. And it's people who care. And I'm not just saying that because I make money from there. It really just is that way. And I've worked at some pretty bad places, through the years. Not a ton, but I've seen bad companies. This is not a bad company. This is a good company. We continue to grow, and I'm proud to be with it.
So of those half-truths that you hear out there from the wrestling media, is that the one that you would push back on, that it's not a good place to work?
I think that's one that's it just paints us as a company that's in chaos. But listen, did you ever see the Muppet Show growing up, Zaslow? Mm-hmm. I've heard 30 Rock, right? Where there's all this chaos before a show, and then boom, the product comes on, and you'd never know as an average fan, right? I mean, there was a report about one wrestler refusing to lose to another wrestler recently at AEW, and that wasn't the whole story that was being told. It's not me to correct these things, right? I'm not out here. That's not my job. I don't work in media relations. I'm not out here to try to expose anything on the business. But I just think that there's some AEW hate watching at times. I think there's some people who, aren't fans of our product and try to tear it down. It's unfortunate. It is what it is, but trust me, we keep going strong. It's still the greatest startup and the most successful startup in the history of pro wrestling. And I don't see things changing anytime soon.
AEW Full Gear this Saturday night. I'm very much looking forward to it, especially the main event. I'm very much looking forward to Swerve Strickland and Hangman, which I think has got a ton of juice to it. I'm hoping Tony Storm wins that championship. I'm a big fan of everything Tony Storm is doing right now. You mentioned the Iron Claw movie, which is coming out next month. Alex, I can't wait to see this movie. Are you excited about this movie?
It's interesting because the Von Erich family is such a tragic situation, right? It's, a father and Fritz Von Erich. Those who don't know, I mean, this was one of the first families of pro wrestling, so to speak. And, they were just monster stars in Texas. But they had a dad who continued to push his kids to a point and proclaiming things about them that just weren't necessarily true. And unfortunately, you had one of the sons dying of what really was probably a drug overdose. It's always been a mystery over in Japan what exactly happened. You have another son commit suicide, another son commit suicide. I mean, it's just crazy. But Kevin Von Erich, the last survivor of all this, Zaslow, and he's moved back to Texas. His kids have gotten involved in pro wrestling, and but not to the extent. Maybe they will a little bit more in 2024, not to the extent of the Von Erich family. But it is a legacy piece. And listen, Zaslow, it's amazing because pro wrestling is a form of entertainment, obviously, but there are some great potential movies that are coming out. Lady of the Ring is coming out. Pretty soon, I believe it's Queen of the Ring. I'm sorry, it's what it is. Jim Ross is, involved with that project. That's coming out. You have so many neat stories that have taken place in wrestling. We saw a little tease of it with Young Rock when that was still on NBC. Mm-hmm. But I think the Von Erich movie is going to do pretty well, and it's going to draw attention to really what was an amazing time in Texas because the Von Erichs truly were rock stars.
Yeah, I'm going into it. I'm excited to see it, but I'm going into it also like trying to prepare myself to be like just heartbroken because I know it's going to be really, really heavy. I'm very much looking forward to it. Again, AEW Full Gear this Saturday night. It's going to be a fun show. Alex, of course, is out there already in California, in Los Angeles. Let's talk a little bit of Dolphins here. So the Dolphins are back in action this weekend. Raiders, Dolphins had the bye. The big theme nationally around the Dolphins is that they're frauds because they can't beat the good teams that they face, even though their losses are the two teams that were in the Super Bowl last year on the road and who right now are at the top of the conferences. Are the Dolphins a fraud, Alex?
Oh, no. And this is the best thing for Mike McDaniel, to be quite honest with you, to have this in his back pocket if he cares to use it as motivation, right? I mean, you're right. I mean, the Dolphins lost, two very competitive games to Kansas City and to Philadelphia. And the Buffalo game had trap game written all over it, as you know. You're coming off a 70-20 win. It's hard to get the attention of your players to pay attention to detail after you wax an opponent like they did the Denver Broncos. I mean, the thing that concerns me about the Dolphins is the same thing that concerned me, 20 years ago when I was covering this team. It's been a recurring issue is the offensive line. Because I think the one commonality, when you look at why did the Dolphins lose to Philly, Kansas City, and Buffalo, offensive line issues, right? I mean, to me, Kansas City just dominated up front. Philadelphia, we know what they bring from a pass rush standpoint. And also, Buffalo that day, AJ Epinesa and company, they were on fire. So I think to me, that's an area where the Dolphins still need to improve. But let's not kid ourselves here. Devon Chan, when he returns to this offense, it changes. I mean, you get that explosive player. When you look at guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, it is just, and the underrated Raheem Mostert, it's very hard to account for everybody, especially when Tua is making plays, and usually he is making plays. So I think the Dolphins are in a great spot, to be quite honest with you. But the key is going to be at least, I can't even say a healthy offensive line because obviously that's a pipe dream always for the Dolphins, especially with Teron Armstead in and out of the lineup. But getting some stability, just making sure that if this team plays against a team with great pass rush, that they're able to give Tua time to get business done.
As someone who's covered the league for a very long time, I need you to help me out with something here because, it's a big story here, obviously. Belichick going for Shula's all-time record. I've always referred to, Belichick's last win a few weeks ago was win number 300. He's 28 behind Shula, regular season wins. But some people refer to it as Belichick is 16 back, 347 to 331, including the postseason victories. So which is it, Alex? Because, we don't include touchdown passes, passing yards, receptions. We don't include playoff stats when we're talking about players' careers. So this is important. 16 wins is a lot different from 28 wins behind Shula. So what's the record? What are we talking about here?
I'll say this, Zaslow. Whenever we talk about Don Shula, what is the number that pops in your head? 347, right? That's the number of wins that Don Shula has. I mean, that is the seminal number for Don Shula. In fact, doesn't he have some marketing with 347 on it? Of products and things. So it's Don Shula himself who will say, if he were with us, 347, you count the playoff wins, and that's how I answered. You make a great point. We don't count, things in the postseason toward regular season stats. I think just because we're trained to have certain things in the regular season and then it magically disappears in the postseason. But I go by the 347 standard when it comes to Belichick and Shula. But at the rate it's going this season, Zaslow, I think Bill Belichick will be 80 by the time he breaks this record. If he keeps just winning 2 games a year, it is an absolute mess in New England. A lot of folks just wondering, is this the swan song for Bill Belichick? I believe Dan Orlovsky fueled some fire by saying that he understands that Belichick has a coach and GM job lined up elsewhere for next year if he wants it. It might be a gracious way for the Patriots to move into a new era and for Bill Belichick to show that his way still works. Right now, Bill Belichick, the talent evaluator, has killed Bill Belichick, the coach. No question about it, Zaslow. His wide receivers can't get separation. He's drafted extremely poorly. Think about this too. From 2014 to 2019, every player that has been drafted in the first 2 days, none of them have re-signed a second contract. I mean, how do you survive like that?
Yeah.
You can't just bring in a free agent year after year. You're going to be a 500 team, basically. You're not able to build around cornerstone players. And that's been one of the Patriots' issues, not to mention the Mac Jones situation at quarterback. So let's just put it like this. I knew that the post-Brady era would be different for Bill Belichick. I didn't think it would be this bad. I thought he'd have answers. Clearly, he has none right now. And this is a franchise in free fall.
I'll let you go on this. I may as well get your thoughts about the game tonight. Probably the best Thursday night game that we've had yet this season. We got Bengals and Ravens. Also in that AFC North, you got Steelers and
Browns,
and Browns. So it's kind of like separation week for the AFC North. Give me some thoughts on the game tonight.
It's fairly funny you mentioned this because before I joined you, I was working on my pregame show that'll air from 7 to 7:25 p.m. Eastern time on Sirius XM NFL Radio, channel 88. And looking at the Bengals, and they're 5-4, but not only are they in 4th place in this division, they're also 0-2 in the AFC North so far, and they're 1-4 in the conference. Zaslow, even if the Bengals were to finish with a good record, because of what's above them, they may be on the outside looking in. This is almost a must-win type of scenario for Cincinnati at this point. And obviously, it's not going to be easy going on the road with the Ravens. They're talking about playoff environment. They're wearing all-black uniforms. We know Baltimore beat Cincinnati in week 2. Lamar Jackson, I think, 3-0 when he's starting opposite of Joe Burrow. The thing for the Ravens is maybe they shouldn't lead going into the 4th quarter because no team falls apart like the Ravens lately when it comes to holding on to a lead. In fact, they're just the 3rd team in NFL history, Zaslow, to lose 4 separate leads of 14 or more points in a game. That's what they did against Cleveland Browns last week. Zaslow, the Browns didn't lead until the final play, and the game was over. In fact, the Ravens have led for all but about 29 minutes of this entire season, but they're 7-3. They beat themselves. If this team can get consistency in the 4th quarter, I mean, you got to look at them as a very legitimate Super Bowl contender, but they should be kicking themselves for some of these losses. Indianapolis, Cleveland. When you're leading in the 4th quarter, you got to be able to seal the deal. It's going to be one of the big points of emphasis tonight for the Ravens if they're in that position against the Bengals.
Alex, excellent job as always. Tell everybody how they could hear you, NFL Radio, and how they could see you and AEW this Saturday night.
Yeah, NFL Radio, Sirius XM, channel 88. I'm on a lot. I'll be on again not only tonight, but on Saturday morning every week, working with Tim Brown, Pro Football Hall of Famer, and obviously Dolphins. Raiders will be a big focus of that, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time. And it's for AEW. Listen, we've got a monster weekend. So you talk about full gear Saturday night on pay-per-view, but on Friday night, we got 3 live hours of AEW coming at you from the Kia Forum. I mean, starting at 8 o'clock Eastern time, we've got Collision, a special Friday night edition going into Rampage at 10 Eastern. We got our pregame show, so to speak, for Full Gear coming up after that. There is so much AEW this weekend. If you have lost interest in pro wrestling, but would be willing to give us a chance, I really recommend you watch it. I feel like it's an incredible product. No, I'm not being paid to say that. I really love what we do at AEW, and I just think it's something that, trust me, get caught up in the excitement. Join us if you can. Watch us Friday night, get the pay-per-view on Saturday, and have a great AEW weekend.
Awesome job, Alex. Have fun this weekend. It's going to be a fun show. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Zaslow. Appreciate you.